The canyon that whispers drones sweeping over the Grand Canyon at sunrise. Golden light spills into endless shadow. The Colorado River glows like molten bronze. They call it the place where time stands still, a chasm carved by the hands of eternity itself. The Grand Canyon. 277 miles long, over a mile deep, and stretching wider than the eye can see. Its cliffs are older than memory, layers of earth that record nearly 2 billion years of history. But among the echoes of wind and water, there are other stories. Stories not written in stone, but whispered in rumor, of something ancient buried deep within the canyon walls, a city that should not exist, a city said to predate every civilization we know. The legend awakes it began, as so many mysteries do, with a newspaper article. On April 5, 1909, the Arizona Gazette printed a report that stunned the world. Two men, G. Kincaid, an explorer, and Professor S.A. Jordan of the Smithsonian Institution, claimed to have discovered something extraordinary in the Grand Canyon, a vast underground complex filled with mummies, copper tools and hieroglyphic writing resembling Egyptian script. The article described an entire subterranean world, chambers carved into solid rock, statues of unknown gods, even a cross-legged idol, unlike anything seen in native or Egyptian culture. It claimed the expedition had found evidence of an ancient civilization, possibly from Asia or Egypt, that existed in North America long before Columbus or the Anasazi. And then silence. The story was never followed up. No photographs, no public records. And when journalists asked the Smithsonian about the discovery, they denied it ever happened. The Forbidden Canyon. To understand how such a mystery could hide in plain sight, you must first understand the canyon itself. The Grand Canyon is not one world, but many. Hidden beneath its vast plateaus are labyrinths of side canyons, caves and tunnels, some so deep no light ever reaches them. For centuries the Hopi and Zuni tribes spoke of these caverns. They said their ancestors emerged from underground, from a place called Sipapuni, the portal between worlds. To them, the canyon was not just landscape. It was memory, a sacred scar left by the gods of creation. When the white explorers arrived, they saw geology. The Hopi saw home, and somewhere between those two visions, the legend was born, the cave that shouldn't exist. According to the 1909 account, G.E. Kincaid was traveling down the Colorado River by boat, mapping the canyon for the Smithsonian. Somewhere near the marble cliffs of the eastern section, around what we now call the Grand Canyon National Park, he noticed a peculiar stain high on the rock wall. It looked unnatural, almost like an entrance. Climbing over 2,500 feet up a steep ledge, Kincaid claimed to find a narrow opening nearly invisible from below. Inside, he said, was a tunnel system extending nearly a mile into the canyon wall. It led to chambers filled with artifacts, urns, copper spears, tablets, mummified remains, and walls covered with hieroglyphic symbols. One chamber, according to the article, was large enough to hold 50,000 people. Others contained idols that looked both Egyptian and Asian, hybrid in design, timeless in craftsmanship. If true, this would have rewritten everything we know about ancient America. It would mean that a lost civilization, possibly with connections across the oceans, once called this canyon home. The vanishing record, and yet, not a trace of Kincaid or Professor Jordan can be found in Smithsonian archives. No expedition records, no payrolls, no correspondences. Inquiries made in the decades after the article's publication all received the same response. No such records exist. Some researchers believe it was a hoax, a piece of sensational journalism meant to sell papers in an era obsessed with Egyptian discoveries, but others noticed something stranger. Several sections of the Grand Canyon near the area described in the article are now off-limits to the public, marked on maps as restricted zones. One of them bears an unusual name, Isis Temple, surrounded by other formations with Egyptian references. Tower of Ra, Buddha Temple, Osiris Temple, coincidence, or the last surviving clue of a forgotten discovery. The weight of silence. The wind grows louder, echoing through empty canyon chambers. Why would such a discovery vanish? If Kincaid truly found something of world-shifting importance, why erase it? Some believe the Smithsonian itself buried the evidence, not out of malice, but out of fear of rewriting history. In the early 1900s, America was building its national identity. The idea that an ancient, advanced civilization once thrived beneath U.S. soil, perhaps older than Egypt itself, would have shattered that narrative. Others suggest something even darker, that what was found in those caverns was not human at all. Researchers of the so-called Grand Canyon mystery claim that private expeditions attempting to locate the cave have been turned away by armed park rangers or military personnel. Citing safety and preservation concerns, to this day, the exact coordinates described in the 1909 report are classified or off-limits. The canyon keeps its secrets. The Grand Canyon is a paradox. It reveals 2 billion years of Earth's past, and yet it hides more than it shows. For every fossil, there is a legend. For every layer of rock, a mystery. Scientists have mapped most of the surface terrain, but over 300 caves remain unexplored. Many are sealed by the government for safety. Others are simply unreachable, and so the whispers continue, carried by wind through stone corridors, blending fact and myth until even truth becomes an echo. The eternal question: was there ever a lost city beneath the Grand Canyon? The Smithsonian denies it. Geologists dismiss it. But every few years, another explorer claims to have found a cave that doesn't belong. In 2019, hikers reported hearing metallic echoes deep inside a closed section near Marble Canyon. In 2022, a drone flight captured what appeared to be a rectangular doorway, later removed from online maps. Maybe they were tricks of shadow and imagination. Or maybe the canyon is still guarding its oldest secret, one that predates America itself. Discovery in the desert. The creak of an old wooden boat drifting through echoing canyon walls. Wind whistles through the narrow gorge. In the spring of 1909, the Colorado River was a wild, uncharted serpent cutting through the heart of the American West. Few dared to navigate its full length. Those who did often vanished. One of those men was G.E. Kincaid, an explorer, adventurer, and veteran of the U.S. Geological Survey. His journey down the river would become one of the most mysterious expeditions in American history. One that, according to a single newspaper article, unearthed something impossible: the man who saw what no one else did. Little is known about Kincaid before that fateful trip. The Arizona Gazette described him as a man of science, not given to exaggeration. According to his own account, he was traveling alone in a small wooden craft, photographing unusual rock strata and collecting geological samples for the Smithsonian Institution. Weeks into his journey, somewhere along the northern Arizona canyon walls, Kincaid noticed something strange. Far above the river, nearly 2,000 feet up, he saw a pattern in the cliff that looked unnatural. A shadow, straight and precise, where no natural fracture should be. Driven by curiosity, he beached his boat and began to climb. The ascent took hours. Loose rock gave way beneath his boots. When he finally reached the ledge, he found an opening. A small, oval-shaped hole about 5 feet high. At first glance, it looked like a natural cave. But when Kincaid shone his lantern inside, the light didn't stop. It disappeared into blackness, down a smooth, carved tunnel that ran deeper than he could see. He had found something that didn't belong. the gateway to the unknown Kincaid, crawled inside. The air was cool and dry, ancient. He realized almost immediately that the passage wasn't random. The walls were too smooth, the floor too even. After 50 feet, the tunnel widened into a corridor large enough to stand in. Marks of tools were visible, not the jagged cuts of nature, but deliberate shaping, deeper in. His lantern revealed strange carvings on the walls, lines, symbols, and figures that looked unlike anything he had ever seen in the American Southwest. Then came the chamber. It was vast, large enough to fit a modern cathedral. Pillars carved from the bedrock held up the ceiling, and along the walls stood statues, all facing east, their features worn but unmistakably human. Some looked vaguely Egyptian, others Asian, and a few resembled no known culture at all. In the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat a stone idol, cross-legged, hands resting on its knees, its expression serene and eternal. Behind it were smaller chambers filled with urns, copper weapons, and the mummified remains of humanoid figures, all wrapped carefully in bark and resin. The Hidden City Kincaid's journal, as quoted by the Arizona Gazette, described a labyrinth of tunnels extending for miles. There were granaries, storage rooms, ceremonial halls, and even a central chamber that could have served as a meeting place for thousands. The article claimed the site could have housed more than 50,000 people at its height, an underground metropolis, carved into the very bones of the canyon. On the walls were hieroglyphs resembling Egyptian writing, along with symbols that some said were closer to Tibetan or Hindu iconography. This was not a primitive dwelling. It was a city, organized, engineered, deliberate. Kincaid collected samples, photographed several chambers, and marked the location carefully. Then he made his way back down the canyon to send word to his employers at the Smithsonian. According to the Gazette, weeks later he returned, this time accompanied by Professor S.A. Jordan, head of a Smithsonian archaeological division. Together, they explored and catalogued the site, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. The article that shocked the nation. On April 5, 1909, the Arizona Gazette published the now famous front-page headline, "Explorations in Grand Canyon. Remarkable finds indicate ancient people migrated from the Orient." The piece described in detail the discovery: chambers filled with artifacts, idols made of stone and gold, a crypt with mummies, and inscriptions that linked the find to ancient Egypt or Tibet. It was written as if the journalist had interviewed Kincaid himself, but almost as soon as it appeared, the story vanished from public record. No follow-ups, no Smithsonian confirmation, no trace of Kincaid or Jordan in federal archives. The paper's other issues from that week contained mundane local news, mine openings, livestock sales, weather reports. Nothing suggested a hoax. So what happened to the greatest archaeological discovery in American history? The Smithsonian denial inquiries to the Smithsonian over the following decades all met the same response. No record exists of any such expedition. No artifacts of Egyptian or Asian origin have ever been found in the Grand Canyon, yet the mystery deepened. Researchers noticed that several areas described in the report near the mouth of the Little Colorado River are restricted, under federal control. Even early 20th century maps labeled certain sectors with names that sound almost mythical. Isis Temple, Tower of Ra, Buddha Temple, Osiris Temple, all in the same region the Gazette described. Coincidence or clue? Some believe the names were chosen long before 1909. Others argue they were part of a coded reference to the discovery itself. Whatever the truth, access to many of these sites remains heavily limited, with no public trails leading to the cliffs where Kincaid's entrance was supposedly found. Theories rise like dust as decades passed. The lost city of the Grand Canyon became a legend whispered in the margins of history. Some called it a hoax, claiming the Gazette fabricated it for publicity during an era fascinated by Egyptian tombs and lost worlds. Others, however, pointed out that the Arizona Gazette was not a tabloid. It was a respected regional newspaper. Its editors risked credibility by publishing such a claim, and the Smithsonian's silence only fueled suspicion. By the mid-20th century, alternative researchers began suggesting that the Grand Canyon discovery had been suppressed, not because it was false, but because it was too disruptive. If an ancient, non-native civilization existed in North America thousands of years ago, it would rewrite everything about human migration, archaeology, and the origins of civilization itself. To acknowledge it would mean admitting that America's history began long before Columbus, long before Clovis Points or the Bering Land Bridge, perhaps even before recorded history. Echoes in the canyon sound, slow fade-in of wind through stone, echoing footsteps. Even today, hikers and river guides tell strange stories of blocked-off caves, sealed with steel gates by the National Park Service, of unnatural carvings on remote cliff faces, of a hum that seems to come from deep within the rock, a vibration that fades as quickly as it's felt. Some locals say that, at sunset, if you stand near the confluence of the Little Colorado and the main river, you can hear faint metallic echoes, as if something beneath the canyon still breathes. Archaeologists dismiss it as imagination, but to those who believe the legend, the canyon is not empty. It is watching. Between fact and faith. Every great mystery walks a fine line between truth and myth. For the Grand Canyon, that line is drawn in stone and in silence. If Kincaid's discovery was real, it would mean that advanced civilizations reached North America long before recorded history, long before we believed ocean travel was possible. If it was false, it remains one of the most persistent hoaxes ever printed, a single story powerful enough to survive over a century of denial. But maybe the real mystery isn't whether the city existed. Maybe it's why we keep searching for it, because somewhere beneath those ancient cliffs, we sense that history is incomplete, that there are pages missing from the story of America, and sometimes the silence of official history is the loudest clue of all. The Forbidden Caves. Inside, America's greatest archaeological mystery. Wind moving through vast canyons, distant eagle cry, then the soft echo of dripping water. In the depths of the Grand Canyon, where sunlight rarely touches stone, there are whispers of a forbidden world, a network of caves said to stretch for miles, carved by hands long vanished from the earth. Official maps mark only a few hundred of these caverns, but geologists estimate there could be thousands, hidden beneath the plateaus, sealed by time and silence. Some are known, many are lost, and a few, it seems, are deliberately kept from sight. The sealed entrances in recent decades, hikers, rafters, and even park employees have reported strange encounters in the canyon's restricted zones. Caves sealed with iron bars, unmarked doors built into cliff faces, and signs that read simply, "No entry, federal property." To most visitors, they're invisible, miles from tourist routes, accessible only by air or by scaling sheer walls. But to those who have seen them, they match eerily well the descriptions from 1909, high on the vertical cliffs, unreachable without ropes, and near formations with names like Isis Temple and Tower of Ra. These are places the public will never stand. They are marked hazardous, unstable, environmentally protected. But believers say another word fits better. Hidden, the canyon's sacred memory. Long before explorers or newspapers spoke of lost civilizations, the canyon was sacred to its first people, the Hopi, Zuni, Havasupai, and Navajo nations. In Hopi tradition, humanity did not begin on the surface of the earth. It emerged from beneath it, from a vast living underworld known as Sipapuni, the place of emergence. This underworld, they said, was filled with light and sound, ruled by powerful beings who guided humankind to the surface through a portal. That portal, the Hopi claim, lies within the Grand Canyon. Even today, Hopi elders perform ceremonies honoring this origin, a reminder that the canyon is not just a scar of geology, but a wound of memory opening between worlds. What if those myths were not metaphors but memories, echoes of something ancient that once lived beneath the stone? When early anthropologists recorded Hopi legends in the 19th century, they noted similarities to other global myths, from the Egyptian underworld of Duat to the Tibetan Shambhala. Different continents, different cultures, but the same theme, a civilization beneath the earth, wise, radiant, and lost to time. The science of the impossible. Modern geologists dismiss the idea of man-made tunnels in the canyon as fantasy. The rock layers, limestone, shale, and sandstone, are brittle and unstable, they argue. To carve chambers large enough to fit thousands of people, says one Smithsonian curator, would collapse under their own weight. The environment simply doesn't allow it, and yet there are anomalies. Cave systems like the Grand Canyon caverns, located miles from the rim, are among the largest dry caverns on Earth, naturally hollowed but stable. Some extend for tens of miles underground. In 2014, spelunkers discovered a previously unknown tunnel network, branching beneath an area near the Colorado River. Its entry point quickly sealed off by the National Park Service for safety reasons. Safety, perhaps, or secrecy. The names that shouldn't exist if you open a U.S. Geological Survey map of the canyon. One thing stands out: a cluster of ancient Egyptian and Asian names concentrated in a single region of the canyon. Isis Temple, Osiris Temple, Buddha Temple, Shiva Temple, Cheops Pyramid, Tower of Ra. They were assigned in the early 1900s by geologist Clarence Dutton, years before or possibly around the same time as the 1909 article. Some scholars say Dutton chose the names poetically, inspired by the grandeur of the formations. But others ask, why these names? Why here? Why a pocket of Egyptian and Hindu gods, all in the same small region, near where Kincaid's alleged cave was said to be? The coincidences begin to sound like coordinates. The Smithsonian connection. If G.E. Kincaid truly worked with the Smithsonian, where are the records? Researchers have searched for decades. No expedition logs. No employee named Kincaid in Smithsonian rosters. No Professor S.A. Jordan. And yet, early Smithsonian reports from 1908-1911 mention archaeological activity in the Arizona Canyonlands. Shipments labeled stone artifacts were received but never displayed. And a memo from 1911, preserved in the National Archives, references material of uncertain origin held pending further classification. Coincidence? Or the paper trail of a discovery quietly erased? Those who believe the legend say the Smithsonian buried the evidence, literally and figuratively. Others go further, suggesting that knowledge of the Grand Canyon's underground civilizations connects to global archaeological suppression, from the pyramids of China to the forbidden tunnels of Giza. Too many similarities, too much at stake. The native warnings among the Havasupai, the people who live deep within the canyon today. There are warnings about the caves. Their elders say the canyon's underworld is not just sacred, it's dangerous. They speak of the old ones, spirits who still guard what lies below. To disturb them is to awaken something meant to sleep forever. Even in the 20th century, Havasupai elders guided park rangers away from certain cliffs, insisting that voices echo there at night. Rangers confirmed unusual acoustic patterns, deep, resonant frequencies that cause dizziness and unease. Scientists attribute it to wind compression in narrow gaps. But the locals have a simpler explanation. The canyon remembers who enters. Lost expeditions. Over the last century, dozens of amateur explorers have tried to find Kincaid's cave. Most returned empty-handed. A few never returned at all. In 1956, a group of 4 Arizona University students disappeared while hiking a restricted area near Marble Canyon. Their abandoned gear was found days later. Ropes cut cleanly, no sign of struggle, no trace of bodies. In 1972, an amateur archaeologist named David White claimed to have discovered an entrance sealed with concrete and steel bolts. When he returned a week later, it was gone, replaced by fresh rock debris, as if the mountain had been patched. And in 2019, drone footage surfaced online showing what appeared to be rectangular openings high on the canyon wall, large enough for a person to enter. Within 48 hours, the video was taken down for violating park drone restrictions. No one has seen the footage since. Between myth and memory, narrator, soft, reflective. If the caves truly exist, who built them? And how long ago? Some say they were the work of a prehistoric American culture, ancestors of the ancestral Puebloans, whose cliff dwellings still cling to the 4 corners. Others believe they were refugees from a cataclysm, survivors from a lost world, perhaps even Atlantis, who crossed oceans long before recorded history. And some point to the similarities in iconography, serpents, suns, wings, that appear both in native art and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Perhaps they suggest the connection between continents was never broken, merely forgotten. The government's quiet control. The Grand Canyon is one of the most tightly controlled natural sites in America. Every drone flight requires approval. Every excavation needs a federal permit. Satellite imagery of certain zones appears blurred on public databases. In 2016, a Freedom of Information request asking for details on sealed caves and restricted archaeological sites within the canyon received this response from the National Park Service. Due to cultural sensitivity and national security concerns, the requested information cannot be disclosed. Cultural sensitivity is understandable. National security? That's harder to explain. The canyon's dual face to the world. The Grand Canyon is a national treasure, a symbol of America's natural majesty. To others, it's a vault, a tomb of forgotten civilizations. Every visitor sees the same horizon, but not everyone sees the same truth. Some see the work of rivers and time. Others, the fingerprints of gods and men who came before us. Maybe both are true, because somewhere within these red walls, science and myth share the same shadow, and whatever hides in that shadow has survived untouched for millennia. Silence from the Smithsonian. The disappearance of evidence and the war on hidden history. Every legend leaves a trail, if you know where to look. Old letters, field notes, shipping logs. But when researchers went searching for the Smithsonian's paper trail to the Grand Canyon discovery, they found something else, a void. The missing files by the 1940s. Dozens of independent historians had requested access to the Smithsonian's 1908-1911 expedition records. Almost all were told the same thing. No files found, yet. Official annual reports from that period mention survey, work in the Arizona Canyonlands, funding for archaeological materials retrieved from the Southwest, and shipments labeled unclassified cultural objects. Some documents still exist, but their details stop exactly where the mystery begins, spring 1909. One researcher called it an archival blackout cut cleanly across time. Coincidence or control? America's era of discovery and doubt. The early 1900s were a time of scientific pride. The Panama Canal was under construction. Roosevelt's Smithsonian-sponsored African expedition was headlining newspapers. The institution was building its reputation as guardian of knowledge, classifying the natural world, defining what was acceptable science. To acknowledge a discovery that connected North America to ancient Egypt or Asia would have undermined the entire framework of Western archaeology. It would mean civilization was not born in the Old World and spread westward, but that America might have been a cradle of its own. Such a claim was heresy to the science of its time. The official denials, when the Arizona Gazette story resurfaced in the 1930s, the Smithsonian responded tersely. No record of a G.E. Kincaid or Professor S.A. Jordan exists in our archives. That was true, but only technically. Later researchers found that the Smithsonian's Department of Anthropology did not formally record contracted explorers until 1910. Prior to that, many expeditions operated under temporary funding from the Bureau of American Ethnology, records that were never digitized, and many of which were lost in a 1937 warehouse fire in Maryland. So perhaps the men never existed, or perhaps their records were among the ashes. The conspiracy that wouldn't die as decades passed, a pattern emerged. Claims of lost artifacts, missing fossils, and disappearing discoveries began appearing worldwide, all traced back to major museums or governments. In the 1960s, former Smithsonian curator Harold Gladwin publicly accused the institution of scientific gatekeeping, saying it destroyed anomalous finds that didn't fit accepted chronology. In response, the Smithsonian tightened its collections policy and stated flatly, "The institution has never withheld nor destroyed archaeological materials for the purpose of concealment, but the damage was done." The public no longer trusted silence, the politics of proof narrator, low tone. In science, evidence is power, and control of evidence is control of truth. During the Cold War, funding for archaeology often passed through government agencies concerned with strategic resources and land rights. By then, the Grand Canyon was federal territory. If underground systems existed, they would fall under jurisdiction of the Department of the Interior and later the National Park Service. Files labeled Archaeological Survey could easily be sealed under national security classifications if they were connected to land use or geological mapping. Thus, a legend was born not only of ancient builders, but of modern bureaucracy. The scholars who dared to ask, a handful of academics refused to let the story die. In the 1970s, archaeologist David Hatcher Childress and later researchers like John Rhodes and Wayne May sifted through regional archives, tracking down descendants of 1900-era river surveyors. Several families claimed to own photographs showing an unusual stone entrance high on the canyon wall, images now lost after a house fire in 1962. In 2001, a team of Arizona State University students petitioned the Park Service to allow a laser scan of restricted areas near Isis Temple. Permission was denied. Official reason: cultural and environmental sensitivity. Unofficial result: the mystery remained intact. Echoes in modern technology when LiDAR mapping revolutionized archaeology in the 2010s. Scientists used it to reveal lost cities in Guatemala and Cambodia. Enthusiasts asked, why not the Grand Canyon? The answer was simple: restricted airspace. The Federal Aviation Administration limits flights below 14,500 feet in much of the park. Private LiDAR surveys require special permits rarely granted. In 2021, a team from Northern Arizona University attempted to use ground-based LiDAR from opposite ridges. Their scans returned anomalous voids, perfectly rectangular pockets deep within the cliff. When they released their findings, the paper was withdrawn pending verification. The data has not been republished. Why the silence matters science is built on questions. But in America's greatest natural wonder, questions are treated like trespass. Whether the Smithsonian ever found a city is less important than why. The story cannot be freely investigated. The canyon belongs to the public, yet its deepest reaches remain sealed by law. If nothing is there, why guard it so tightly? Maybe the truth is simple. The Grand Canyon is dangerous, unstable, and sacred. Or maybe the truth is complex, that beneath its layers of sandstone lies a story so old it defies our chronology. The voice of the skeptics. Not everyone believes in the legend. Archaeologist Stephen Lexon argues that no artifact from the Grand Canyon matches Old World styles. Historian Robert Schoch adds that if such a discovery had been made, it would require massive infrastructure to suppress, far beyond a single agency's capacity. Their point is valid. Perhaps the legend is a mirror, reflecting our own need to believe that mystery still exists in a world we claim to understand. But even they admit one thing: no one has ever disproven the story either. When history becomes heritage, maybe the Smithsonian's greatest crime was not concealment, but forgetfulness. A century of Western science has often written its story without the voices of the first Americans. The Hopi, Zuni, and Navajo still see the canyon as a living being. To dig into its heart is to cut into something holy. Perhaps the legend was buried not to hide a civilization, but to protect a sacred truth the modern world was not ready to respect. The unanswered question: what if both stories are true? What if an ancient people did carve a world beneath the canyon, and their descendants still live among us, quietly keeping its memory safe from those who would turn it into a headline? Maybe the Smithsonian's denial was a shield, not a cover-up. Maybe secrecy was the last act of respect for a civilization that asked to be left in peace. America's ancient enigma, myth, science, and the return of the old ones. Every civilization leaves behind a riddle. Sometimes it's written in language, sometimes in ruins. But in America's deserts, the riddle is written in stone, a question older than any nation, any flag, any frontier. Could an ancient civilization have thrived here, long before the first settlers, before the first tribes, before even history itself began? The myths beneath our feet for centuries. The indigenous nations of the Southwest have carried stories of the first people, the ones who came from the earth. The Hopi speak of the Snake Clan and the Ant People, beings who guided humanity from the underworld during an age of darkness. The Zuni tell of the Ashiwani, guardians of the world below. The Navajo speak of the changing women who brought life from the womb of the rocks. To Western ears, they were myths. But to the people of the canyon, they were history, preserved not in writing, but in ritual and memory. The Hopi word for their place of emergence, Sipapuni, describes a real location. A hole in the earth near the confluence of the Little Colorado River, the same region where the 1909 expedition claimed to find its lost city. Coincidence or convergence? The symbols return in the late 20th century. Archaeologists studying petroglyphs along the canyon walls noticed something startling: geometric carvings resembling Old World symbology. The ankh, the spiral sun, the serpent coil, and the lotus motif. Most dismissed it as coincidence, patterns repeated across cultures, but others pointed out how precise these carvings were, aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and star movements, just like those at Giza or Angkor. Science could not prove a connection, but symbolism could not deny it either. The same sun, the same sky, the same human need to carve meaning into stone. The old ones in the canyon among the Hopi. There's a story told only in winter of the Pukanghoya, the old ones who lived in the underworld, keepers of forgotten knowledge. It is said they built chambers of light beneath the canyon where sacred fire burned without smoke. When the surface world grew violent, they retreated below, not to die, but to wait until the earth was ready for balance again. Some Hopi elders still whisper that the light beings will one day return, when humankind once more honors the balance between nature and spirit, and when explorers claim to see strange lights deep in the canyon's forbidden zones, glowing orbs that rise from the cliffs and vanish into the dark. The elders simply smile and say, perhaps they are awake again. The science of lost time in recent years. Scientists have begun to acknowledge that human civilization may be far older than once believed. Archaeological sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey date back to 10,000 BCE, long before the first cities of Mesopotamia. Ancient DNA found in the Americas suggests humans may have lived here 30,000 years ago, far earlier than the traditional migration timeline. If people could reach the Americas so long ago, could some have built complex societies now erased by time? Geologist Robert Schoch argues that erosion rates in the canyon show evidence of ancient reworking structures or cavities later, reshaped by geological movement. Perhaps the lost city wasn't entirely built, but partly found, a collaboration between man and earth. The forbidden knowledge. Throughout history, knowledge has been guarded and sometimes buried. The ancient Maya believed their wisdom came from the stars. The Egyptians said it came from gods beneath the earth. The Hopi say it came from both. When civilizations collapse, their knowledge doesn't vanish. It becomes myth, waiting for rediscovery. And maybe that is the real heart of the Grand Canyon mystery. Not a literal city of stone, but a city of memory. A map of how humanity once understood its place in the universe. The modern pilgrims, each year, hundreds of explorers, researchers and believers travel to Arizona chasing the legend. They carry maps, drones, old compass readings, and hope. Many find nothing. Some claim to find clues, stone walls too smooth, glyphs too old, echoes that travel too far. But what they really find is something deeper, the realization that the unknown still exists. In a world measured by satellites and smartphones, the Grand Canyon remains a reminder that not all truths can be scanned or uploaded. Its silence is sacred, and it is winning. Between heaven and earth, at sunset, the canyon becomes a cathedral of light, every rock glowing red, gold and violet, as if the sky itself were painting the earth. To the Hopi, this is the hour when worlds overlap, when the underworld breathes upward and the spirits walk among the living. To the geologist, it's the play of photons through sediment. To the archaeologist, it's erosion in beauty. To the dreamer, it's proof that something beyond reason still lives here. All are right. All are wrong. That's the power of the canyon. It refuses to belong to any single truth. The echo of civilization. If a city truly lies beneath the Grand Canyon, it may not be lost at all. It may be sleeping. A monument not to what humanity once built, but to what it once believed. Belief in balance. Belief in the sacredness of earth. Belief that knowledge and spirit were one. And perhaps that is what the old ones guarded. Not gold, not idols, but the memory of a world where every breath was holy. The future beneath the stone in 2025. A joint research proposal between Arizona State University and a Hopi cultural preservation group was submitted to re-examine restricted canyon sites using non-invasive sonar imaging. If approved, it would be the first collaboration between Western science and indigenous wisdom in the canyon's history. Their goal is not to prove a legend, but to listen, because maybe, just maybe, the canyon will speak again when the world learns to ask with humility instead of conquest. The eternal question, so what if it's true? What if beneath this canyon, deeper than any explorer has ever gone, there lies a city carved by hands older than memory, where Egyptian glyphs and Hopi spirals meet in stone? Would the world believe it? Would it change how we see ourselves, not as masters of the past, but as inheritors of a forgotten age? Or would it be buried again, under paperwork and denial, because it doesn't fit the story we tell about who we are? Every civilization buries its gods in time, but sometimes the gods wait for us to dig them up again. The canyon is not a riddle to be solved. It is a mirror, reflecting both science and soul. And perhaps the greatest truth hidden beneath its walls is this: that humanity is far older, far wiser, and far more connected than we dare to admit. When the sun sets over the crimson cliffs and the shadows stretch like memories across the land, the air feels thick with presence, not of ghosts, but of guardians. Maybe the old ones never left. Maybe they are the canyon itself, watching, waiting, whispering through the wind.